Hey, Pastor Josh here. We're reading Genesis chapter 16, verses 1 through 5. And now Abraham and Sarah are going to challenge God's plan for them. God has promised them land. He's also promised them children. And he seems to make it very clear that Sarah would be the mother of the child that the promise would come from. God promised Abraham that his descendants would be like the stars of the sky. And the way that promise would be fulfilled was through Sarah. And so here we have Sarah and Abraham going against God's plan, going against God's promise. So let us read that, and I think we'll find some helpful direction for our own lives as we seek to follow the Lord. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, remember they will change their names a little later, but this is Sarah and this is Abraham. Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children. And if you remember at the very beginning of this entire Abraham story, it's Genesis chapter 11, verse 30, we are told that Sarah was barren. And so we know this is going to be a problem. And for those of you that know this story well, you know it was going to be a problem because God was promising to give Abraham a very large family, descendants, through Sarah and Abraham. And so now we're reminded Sarah, Abraham's wife, bore him no children. And notice, too, this emphasis on wife. We're going to see wife show up several times because Moses is wanting us to know as Moses puts together this book. Remember, the Lord is going to be using Moses to put this book together. So the book of Genesis was written by Moses, put together by Moses after they had come out of Egyptian slavery and are at Mount Sinai and are preparing to go into the promised land. And so Moses wants us to know this is Abraham's wife, and this should be the person who should have the children or the child that God is promising Abraham. So we'll see that pop back up again. So she, the wife, born him no children, but she had a female Egyptian servant whose name was Hagar. Okay, well, the wife didn't, but we do have this Egyptian servant who is in the picture. So we see the contrast here. Two women, an Egyptian servant, and then Abraham's wife. Sarai said to Abram, "Behold, now the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Look." Remember that word behold is a fancy word for look, like look intently. Look, the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. This is an attitude we need to adopt. Sarah is correct in the fact that she is attributing the reason that she is not having children to the Lord. Anything that happens to us has to be approved by God. There's nothing that happens in this universe without the Lord somehow allowing it and agreeing that this can happen. God can prevent anything that He so desires. What we have to remember is that as Christians, as children of the promise, if you're a believer in Jesus Christ, that even the bad things that happen to us, God allows them because He knows He's going to turn it for some sort of good, either in our lives or in the lives of other people. And those are things that we will understand, I think, more clearly when we're actually with the Lord and all of this is said and done. But she is recognizing the Lord has prevented it. But we need to not do what Sarah does. Sarah sins. You see, there's all kinds of red all over this. Sarah sins, Abraham sins, Hagar sins. They're all sinning. And it's because they are responding to their circumstances wrongly. Yes, Sarah's understanding correctly that the Lord has prevented this. But if the Lord has prevented it, then maybe we should still obey the Lord instead of trying to take things into our own hands. That's what Sarah and Abraham will do. And that's what you and I do. We know the rules. We know the principles God has given us. So rather than following those rules and principles, we just do it our own way, don't we? We have to make sure we don't do that. So let's look at the sins that she does. She then propositions Abraham. She says, hey, go into my servant. You know, we got Hagar here. She's a She's my servant. We got her from Egypt. Why don't you take her? Why don't she be your wife? And you can have a child through her. It could be my child, but we will have it through her. In this idea of surrogacy was apparently a common practice in the ancient Near East. So this is something everybody else was doing. But as we're going to find out, it is a very unwise and it is a very wrong thing to do. So Sarah says, "Okay, let's sin. Why don't you take my servant and have a child?" Silliness. We're gonna fulfill God's promises by sinning. No, you never do that. You never fulfill God's promises by sinning. She says, "Go to my servant. It may be that I shall obtain children by her." Now this is interesting. You don't see this with the ESV. I think the NIV actually translates it as built, but the Hebrew underneath this word I shall obtain children is I will build. I will build me a house. I will build. If you give me a child through my servant, then I'm going to have a house built for me. That's the Hebrew that's given us right there. And what does that remind you of? What stories happened a little bit in the past in Genesis where they were building and trying to accomplish God's purposes. The Tower of Babel, right? So here we go. We've got Sarah doing Tower of Babel stuff, and she's not supposed to be doing that. We don't build our own tower to God. We don't do that. We don't build a name for ourselves. And here she is doing Tower of Babel type thing. So she says, "Go into my servant so that a house can be built for me, so that I shall obtain children." That was a Hebrew euphemism, or of saying, hey, there was a saying that the Hebrews would say in order to have children: "Build me a house." And what did Abraham do? And Abram listened to the voice of Sarah. Another sin. So, of course, oftentimes it is wise for a husband to listen to his wife, or for a wife to listen to her husband. It would be wise if they're saying things that are in line with who? With the Lord. But she's not saying things. We just saw chapter 15 that God is saying this is not how we're going to do it. So Abraham's going to listen to her. He's not going to go against her. He said, okay, let's do that. So again, Abraham's sinning. So after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarai, Abram, took Hagar the Egyptian, her servant, and gave her to Abram, her husband, as a wife. Now we just saw Tower of Babel imagery here. I build me a house. We also have some Eden imagery here. Adam and Eve sinning. If you remember, Eve, when she was looking at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that she saw that the fruit was good for food and it would make her wise, and then she took it and she gave it to Adam, who was with her. And we see all three words right here. Behold, she tells Abraham, "Behold, the Lord has prevented me." So you have the look, and then she took, and then she gave. So just like Eve saw the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, she took it and she gave it to Adam that was with her. What is Sarah doing? She saw her servant. She saw this problem, and she takes Hagar. She took Hagar and then gives her to Abraham. So many times we do the same thing. We solve problems in ways that we should not be solving them. We go against God's clear commands, and we take the action that we should not, or we take the thing that we should not be doing, and then we give it and we act on it in ways that we should not. We need to be following God's principles and guidance. Verse 4, and he went into Hagar, and she conceived immediately. So what do you think that's going to do between Hagar's relationship and Sarah's relationship? As soon as Hagar attempts to have a child, she has it. Sarah, nothing. All of these years she's been married to Abraham has not been able to have a child. And when she saw that she had conceived, now Hagar is sinning, she looked with contempt on her mistress. She is upset with her. She's feeling prideful for herself. I'm able to have a child and you are not. I'm better than you. God loves me more than you. Looking at contempt on her mistress. She's sinning. So this whole surrogacy thing's not working out. It's causing all kinds of problems. And now listen to what Sarah says. And Sarah said to Abram, "May the wrong done to me be on you." She says, You did this. But Sarah's the one that suggested the whole thing. But she says, "May the wrong done to me be on you. I gave my servant to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May the Lord judge between you and me." She's saying, you need to fix this, Abraham. And actually, Abraham could have fixed it at the very beginning. You know what he should have said? He should have said, "Sarah, the Lord told me that we're going to have a child through you. And we're not going to do what you're suggested." That's how he could have done it. That's how he could have been a judge at the beginning and said, "No, I'm not doing that. The Lord told me, did not tell us to do that, and I'm not going to do it." But he didn't. And then so now he's finding himself in a really sticky situation. I think that's a good thing for us to put in the back of our head. When we don't obey the Lord correctly first time, second time, or third time, then it's just going to cause more problems down the road. We'll see how Abraham resolves this and how the Lord helps him resolve it. But that is going to be for the next video. Pray that's been a blessing to you. See y'all later.